It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Casey Shaw, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. Back on May 29th, I posted pictures of lights that were appearing on this person's property, and I spoke with Jameis. He's agreed to come on the show. It's actually on his stepfather's property, and Jameis told me, when I was growing up, we saw UFOs out there. I mean, nothing major, but just weird objects, weird lights flying around in the sky at night. And this new thing that's happening on the property is bizarre. These lights keep appearing all around the property, and mainly at night, but they do appear during the day. And as I was talking to Jameis, I asked him, has your stepdad ever seen any cryptids out there, anything like that going on? And he said, no, not really, just these weird lights are popping up, and he doesn't know what they are. So I posted the video, kind of a short clip of what's going on that property, and I'll be having Jameis on the show along with his stepfather here in the future to discuss it. But take a look at that video. Tell me what you guys think. You guys are pretty good at looking at stuff like this, and I'd like your opinion. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And I'm almost done with the studio. I've been working throughout the night trying to get that thing up. I have it all soundproofed, and just got to seal the floor and get the doors back on, and we're good to go. So I've been going nonstop throughout the week, and it's amazing. When you're 20, you do stuff like this. You bounce out of bed the next morning. You're a little sore, but no big deal. But 20 years later, when you do it, you're like, I'm not sure if I can walk. I feel like I've been hit by a car. Maybe podcasting's making me soft. Tonight, we're going to be chatting with Carrie. And Carrie and her husband bought a property out there in Tennessee about 6 years ago, and just started noticing just weird things going on the property. And I've talked to Carrie a few times, and Carrie told me, Wes, I always thought this Bigfoot thing was nonsense. I always thought it was a joke. And when she says she's a hunter, an outdoors woman, she's not kidding. She is. So we'll be chatting with her tonight. Let's actually jump into it. I want to welcome Carrie to the show. Carrie, thanks for coming on.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here, Carrie. I know 6 years ago, you and your husband bought this property out there in Tennessee. Let me ask you, prior to buying this piece of property, let's say 7 years ago, if someone asked you about Bigfoot, what would you say?
I Well, I wouldn't say what I was thinking, but I would think that they were totally nuts. I definitely didn't believe, and I would just be like, "Oh, okay, really? That's nice." And I don't. If you think somebody's crazy, you try to be polite. You don't want to. You don't want to make a crazy person mad. I would think that they were nuts. I did not 100%. I mean, okay, 500% did not believe. I was probably the most non-believing person ever. Totally didn't believe it. Totally didn't believe it.
Yeah, and I get it. I definitely get it. And it's fascinating to me to kind of understand someone's mindset prior to having something happen to them, like what happened to you and your husband. Let me ask you, so you guys move into the property. When did you start noticing something's not quite? I know you had a sighting, but when did you start noticing something's not quite right here?
Well, almost immediately, the first week, I grew up in Virginia and used to go to West Virginia a lot. And I'm an outdoor person, a woods person. I hunted 20 something years. I grew up playing in the woods, so I know, and that's I don't know nowadays, probably not, but that may be an unusual thing for a lot of women. Back, way back, maybe not now, but I'm very much an outdoor woods person, so I know the sounds of what's supposed to be out there sound like what's not supposed to. Like, I can tell you the difference if a squirrel is coming or a deer or a bird. And I just know the sounds and what things are supposed to look like. And the first week we had finished moving in, at the end of the week we were taking boxes out, and it was about 7 o'clock in the evening. It was late spring, and I heard whistlings coming from one side of the property. Okay, let me give you a layout. It's a house, and then it's a flat field of an acre flat, and a creek runs along the edge of the right side of it, and then it backs up to kind of a U shape, a horseshoe around the back acre of the property to mountains and woods, heavy woods that goes into the Smoky Mountains far. I mean, it just goes long, long ways for as long as you can walk pretty much before anything is back there. And in the front of our house is about an acre, and there's a little tiny country road and railroad tracks. And right along the railroad tracks is about a 10-foot wide strip of woods. And then there's a river, a wide river that runs into the Pigeon River and connects with the Cherokee River, a bunch of Nolichucky River, and a bunch of other rivers. We heard whistling coming from one side of the property, the acre, and then the other side, obviously in the woods. And the whistles, I turned around. My mom had parrots before. And I turned around and looked at it, and I kind of made a joke because the parrots were from the Amazon. I'm like, wow, I didn't know we moved to the Amazon. And my husband's like, that's just the bird. I'm like, that's not like any bird I've ever heard in the woods. And like I said, I've been, all over, hunted woods in West Virginia, all over North Carolina, Dismal Swamp, Georgia, and never heard anything like that. And so the whistles started almost immediately.
I hear ya. I wish I had a good recording of the whistling. The whistling's very bizarre. When you hear it, it sounds like a person, but it doesn't sound like a person. And I know what you mean. It's definitely not a bird. What other things were you guys experiencing on the property?
Um, Things were being disappearing out back. My husband just had some shiny trim put on the top of his car, and he said, "You're not peeling this metal trim off, are you?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "I keep getting these weird rock piles on my car, and my trim is being peeled up." And I laughed, and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And the trim he had put on his car was shiny and silver, and it looked like someone had dug their fingers in and was peeling it up. And there was these little weird rock structures, looked like pyramids, being left there. Well, where we live, there isn't any children. it's farmers or older retired people. We don't really live in like